this is the last video for inequalities, this unit 6 over inequalities in domain and range. And we're going to graph inequalities on the coordinate plane. Okay? So we're going to graph inequalities. We're going to do two variables. So instead of previously we were doing on a number line, this one we're going to do where we have the x and the y, and we're going to graph it just like we graphed equations. So for this video, you will need this half sheet of paper and then this actual practice page that we're going to do a couple of examples from, and then you'll finish it up for me before today is over. So let's start with just this half little sheet. These are the notes that we're going to glue into our spiral on page 38 today. So graphing linear inequalities is exactly like graphing equations. So the first thing that you have to do is you have to solve for y. So you solve for y equals, and that, if you look in your table of contents, it might say isolate y, meaning get it all alone. Okay, so if it doesn't say y equals, like this one does not say y equals, we need to make it say y all by itself on one side. So let's go ahead and do that. So to do that, we're going to put the 2x is on the wrong side, so we have to subtract 2x from both sides. So we get negative 3y is less than 12 minus 2x. And then the last step is to divide by that negative 3. Remember, we share the love, so we're going to divide everything by that negative 3. And so when you're done, you get y is greater than, why is it greater than? That's because anytime we divide by a negative or multiply by a negative, we have to follow that golden rule, remember? So we divided by a negative, so we have to follow the golden rule, which is to flip the sign. So it was less than, and now we're going to flip it. 12 divided by negative 3 is negative 4, and this becomes positive 2/3 x. Okay? Now, if we pretended this was a regular equation, what were the two things that we would know from looking at it? If this were an equal sign, what were the two things that we would know? We would know m and b. So what does m equal? M is 2/3, and b is negative 4. So step 2 is to graph the line. We're going to graph it. And so we're going to say, what is m and what is b? Okay, so to graph the line, we're going to find m and b. So let's go over here to our graph, and let's go ahead and graph it. It begins at negative 4. So we're going to put a dot at negative 4. And it moves 2 over 3, up 2 over 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. So if you notice, I'm going down and back, down and back, down and back. Now, this is just the points for the line. The next thing that we have to do is we have to determine whether or not we have a solid line or a dashed line. Okay? So just excuse me. Just like when we were graphing before, and we would have to determine if the dot was solid or open, that's what we're going to talk about here. So a solid line is when it's or equals to, and a dashed line is when it's not equal to. Okay? So in this case, we have a dashed line. So what does that mean? That means you just draw little bitty lines. You don't connect it all the way through. So that means anything on this line is not equal to. Okay, so it's not included in my solutions. So step 3 is to determine whether or not you have a solid line or a dashed line. Okay? The last step for graphing inequalities is it doesn't say is equal to. So everything on this line would be equals to. But this is actually saying I want it to be bigger than this line. Okay? So that means that I'm going to have to put everything above this line. Okay? Greater than means that I shade above. And I'm always like worried about whether or not I shade above or below, like it's hard to see sometimes. If it's a line like this, it's really easy to see, but typically I'll draw an arrow up from one of the dots to show above, and then I'll shade everything above this line. So you just shade it in. Okay? So, we're going to shade above, so you either shade up. You shade up if Y is on the big side, and you shade down if Y is on the small side. So you shade up if Y is on the big side, and you shade down if Y is on the small side. We're going to put those directions here as well. So if Y is greater than, or Y is greater than or equal to, it's on the big side. And we shade down if Y is on the small side. Okay. So, the last thing is to remember to flip. Remember the golden rule. So remember to flip the inequality symbol if you multiply or divide by a negative. Remember to flip the inequality symbol if you multiply or divide by a negative. So that's what we did in the yellow. So I'm going to highlight that yellow. Okay? So graphing inequalities, it's exactly the same as graphing lines, except for you have to remember, is it a solid line or a dotted line? And do I shade above or below? It's the only thing. So we have to talk about the line and shading. Okay, don't forget about the line and the shading. Alright, so we're going to glue this in on page 38 in our spiral. And then we will be working on the worksheet that I said you needed to have out. Okay, so I'm gluing this in on page 38. Putting it in my spiral right now. You should be as well. Whoa, my hands went really fast. Okay, so this is page 38 of your spiral. Okay, so let's do a couple of examples off of this worksheet, and then you'll finish the rest of it as part of your homework. So there's two different things you graph like normal, except for the line and the shading. So if the symbol is like this, are you going to have a solid or a dotted line? You're going to have a dotted or a dashed line. And if the symbol is like this, where it says or equals to, then you're going to have a solid line. When the symbol is like this, where we have Y is less than or equal to, you're going to shade below. And when the symbol is like this, where Y is on the big side, then you're going to shade above. And the reason I'm saying these words are that sometimes the Y is on the other side. It's not always on the left side. So keep that in mind when you're graphing. Always look to see where is Y. If Y is on the small side, you shade below. And if Y is on the big side, you shade above. So let's look at number 1. So first off, we're going to figure out what M and B are. So what is M? So M is hiding, it's a 1. And what is B? That's the beginning, and it's a 2. So we're going to start at 2, and we're going to move up 1 over 1. And so now we've graphed the line with dots. So now we're going to decide, is it a solid line or a dashed line? And we're going to say it's solid because of the or equals to. So we're going to draw a solid line through it. And then we're going to say, do we shade above or below? So, is y on the small side or the big side? Right now, y is on the small side, so that means we're going to shade down. So remember, you draw an arrow from a dot, and you shade everything on that side of the line. And you're done. So it looks like it's a lot of work, but it's really not that much work. Okay? Alright, let's go ahead and look at number 3. Number 3, what is m? M is -1/3. What is b? B is 2. So that means I begin at 2, and I move down 1/3. Down 1/3. Down 1/3. Up 1, back 3. Up 1, back 3. Now we look at the line. Is it a solid line or a dotted line? This time, since it doesn't say that it's equal to, it's going to be a dashed line. So I draw a dotted line through the dots. I'm not great at drawing dotted lines. I try my hardest. And then, is y on the big side or the small side? Once again, y is on the small side, so I'm going to draw a line from one of the dots and arrow down, and that's the side that I shade on. Okay, easy enough? Okay, let's look at number 8. Number 8, it only says y here, so that's going to be either a hoy or a vux. So which one is this one? This one is going to be hoy. So it's going to be a horizontal line at y equals -3. So we begin at -3. M, the slope, is 0. So we know that because it's 0 in hoy. So then we're going to draw a dot at -3. And does this one get a solid line or a dotted line? It gets a dotted line. And do I shade above or below? Well, this is bigger than, so it's on the big side. So I'm going to shade up. Okay, just like that. You'll finish the rest of these on the front. Let's do a couple of the ones from the back side. So start off with number 1. Number 1 says to isolate y and then graph. So we're going to draw the line. How do we get y all alone? What are we going to do first? Well, we have to move this 2x to the other side. So we're going to subtract 2x from both sides. And we get 4y. Now when we're doing this, in the past I'd say put an equal sign here, but since it's not an equal sign, we're going to put the inequality sign. And we can't put this 8 and this -2x together, so we're just going to write it as a line. 8 minus 2x. The last thing to do is divide by 4. Remember, share the love across all of it. Do I have to flip the inequality if I divide by a +4? That's a no. So we get y is less than or equal to, and 8 divided by 4 is 2, and -2 divided by 4, and then math enter on your calculator. That's going to simplify it, okay? Then that's -1/2 x. Now we're going to graph this. Now I notice I don't have a place for you to find m and b, so you need to do that on your own, okay? M is -1/2, b is 2. So I begin at 2, and I move down 1/2. And up 1, back 2. And then I have to look at my symbol. What kind of line do I draw? Well, if you see a line underneath it, you draw a line. So you're going to draw a solid line. I just remembered that phrase that I told kids last year. If you see a line, you draw a line. If you don't see a line, it's a dotted line. Then you have to say, is y on the big side or the small side? And y is on the small side. So that means that I'm going to shade down. So I pick a dot and draw an arrow downward, and that's the side of the graph I shade on. At the bottom of this, they're asking us to tell whether or not something is a solution. So if you look, where a solution is going to be anything on the shaded area, and if it's a solid line, then it is also a solution. So it's anything on the solid line. So you just have to pick a point and call it a solution. So I'm going to pick like -4, 1. -4, 1 is a solution. That's not the only answer you could put. You could put any answer that you want. Okay? Alright. And then down here we want to pick something that's not a solution. So if it's in the shaded area, it is a solution. If it's not in the shaded area, then it's not a solution. So maybe we'll pick 4, 3. Now you could have picked anything up in this white space to be your solution. Okay? Alright. Let's go ahead and do one more where we're definitely going to have to flip the sign. Let's do number 6. How do I know you have to flip the sign? I'm looking at this coefficient of y. This is what I'm going to have to divide by at the very end. Okay, so we're going to subtract 2x from both sides because it doesn't say y equals yet. So this is negative 5y is less than or equal to 30 minus 2x. Then you're going to divide by negative 5. Now remember, anytime you divide by a negative number, you have to follow the golden rule. So I divided by negative 5, so that means that I have to flip my inequality symbol. So instead of it being on the small side, now y is on the big side. 30 divided by negative 5 is negative 6. Negative 2 divided by negative 5 is positive 2/5 x. Now we graph it, so we have to find m and b. What's m? M is 2/5. What's b? B is this negative 6. So I begin at negative 6, and I'm going to move up to over 5. Okay, that's the only point I can fit on this graph. Now I have to decide if it's a solid or a dotted line. Remember the rule, see a line, draw a line. So it's a solid line this time. Now, is y on the big side or is y on the small side? Well, y is on the big side, so I'm going to shade up. So I'm going to shade everything in this section. Now we have to pick a solution. There's lots of solutions here. 0, 0 is the easiest one to find, so I'm going to say 0, 0. And then what's not a solution? Well, let's look over here. You only have a few pretty points to pick from over here. I'm going to pick this one right here, which is at 5, negative 5. These are not the only answers that I could put here, but these are correct answers. Okay, so when you're doing this, there's lots and lots of correct answers. Just make sure for the solution that it's in the shaded. And if it's not a solution, then it's not in the shaded. Okay? Alright, so your job is to finish up this worksheet as well as the other page that goes along with this for homework. When you finish this one, show it to me so that I can see how you did and answer any questions before you get started on that homework assignment. Thanks so much for watching. Have a wonderful day.